Welcome to my Healing Through Love series, where I introduce you to some beautiful and amazing men and women who have personally healed and have helped others to heal through love. This is about healing from and even because of facing and overcoming challenging life issues, physical and emotional dis-ease, trauma, fears, and insecurities on the way to rediscovering, recreating, and finally living your passion, creativity, joy, and ultimately love for yourself and others. Hi, I'm Dr. Erica Goodstone, Healing Through Love mentor. To me, this is not only about what you have accomplished, but also about the kind of person you have to be and become to help others heal through love. So now for today's guest. Christopher Brodie is a father, law enforcement officer, suicide loss survivor, and seeker. He is dedicated to well-being, from working out at the gym to taking a dip in an icy river or meditating on a mountaintop. Guided by an adventurous spirit, endless curiosity, and a compassionate heart, Chris's mission is to empower those at risk of losing themselves and to uplift everyone, including you, toward a higher state of being. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to a man who, after experiencing two life-changing, intense heartbreaks, his children's loss of their mother, and even huge financial loss, he researched, studied, and practiced the mental, physical, and spiritual methods taught by healers and philosophers around the world throughout the centuries. Through painful deep dives and releasing old beliefs, Chris discovered the most powerful key to healing from trauma, heartbreak, and devastation: love for yourself first and others. How did he do it? Read his story, the moment-to-moment emotional drama and release, his internal self-reflection and healing in this amazing book, Life and Death by Intention. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Christopher Brodie. Welcome.
Hi, Erica. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Very honored. Thank you.
So we'll begin. So I'd like you to begin by sharing with us the mindset that you needed and lived for your work as a law enforcement officer, and how that may have interfered with the powerful and painful self-reflection you began to practice.
So that's an interesting question. Um, as far as how does the enforcing the law
Right, you
and
have to be
having
tough
to
and be so
having to be
sensitive. You got to be careful.
yeah. So so being someone of of compassion and love and kindness and caring for other people, I think that that's really the best kind of person that you'd want in law enforcement because of the position you're in, because you're in a position to exert force and take somebody's freedom based on whatever the crime may be. That's a difficult situation that's fraught with a lot of emotion and a lot of negative emotion. So the more calm and grounding and respect and honoring of your fellow human is gonna only help in that kind of situation. So I think to be able to do it, you have to have a strong sense of um, people that lean towards law enforcement careers. Psychologists often cite that they're high in trait conscientiousness, like right and wrong is very important to them, and order. So that's true for me. I was always a very straight arrow kid growing up. And um, so so I have that value of order, and know that, the laws are important. And so to bring love into that world is just that much more important, because it is a dark place often, and it is a sad place, and there's a lot of suffering there. So if there's someone that I have in custody and they're looking at life changes that are very difficult, I do often find myself being an impromptu therapist, trying to encourage them and tell them how, this isn't the end, and it's a change, it's a hard change, but this is, where you're at, and things, you don't know what can be on the other side, and things can get better, and all you can do now is control what you can and move things to a better place. So I think that's kind of how it happens for me. You are who you are, and it'll follow you. So I wrote a book to try to help other people about, well-being, and so it doesn't just stay inside and doesn't show up in my work. That's who I am there too.
Right. But what I heard you say is that you always liked order, things to be orderly. So my
Mm-hmm.
next question has to do with your marriage. So please tell us briefly about what your marriage was like, what you experienced with your wife, how you met, this is your first wife, your relationship dynamics, and both of your behaviors and emotions before the devastating incident.
So Cindy and I met when we were both very young. I was 19 and she was 15. So it was just kind of like a little spark, and, from a distance, as I was a missionary in the Dominican Republic. And but we both had that inexplicable little spark where crushing on each other, and but it wasn't able to be um, uh, any romantic interaction because of the circumstances of being a missionary. And but fast forward a few years, when I finished, I had kept somewhat in contact with her, and then went back, and it was just a very ultimately impulsive and quick decision to, let's get married, because it was kind of like, either we're going to be married and be together, or not, because I was from San Diego and she's from the Dominican Republic, so it wasn't going to be a long distance relationship. So we got married, and at that young age, she had never had a boyfriend before me. I hadn't ever been in a serious relationship, and I would sum up the way that developed and played out was, uh, you know, we did the best we could with being very unwise and inexperienced in self-knowing, and let alone in relationship, skills, as far as conflict resolution, and uh, uh, being proactive about growing together. It was like just born in passion and love, and it was sincere, and we lasted 16 years until it fell apart. But it was very difficult. In hindsight, we were very misaligned in the type of, I think, what we expected in a relationship. And so what I learned later is that we were very, the masculine feminine dynamic, I've come to see and understand it as being a very important core foundation of relationships, and of a man being in a very healthy masculine type role, embodying those traits of direction, and solid, and um, being a someone that they could deeply trust because of his stability and calmness under pressure and those kind of things. And then the feminine is most thrives, and the relationship thrives when she's soft and not a pushover, but is nurturing, does show nurturing, and does show affection, and is willing to follow when led appropriately. And so we didn't have that because I had all the classic nice guy syndrome traits growing up in I think in a society that breeds that, and then a religion that breeds that, and then a mother who also was um, very it wasn't a healthy mother-son relationship. So I I was under the mindset that it was like I needed to make her happy at all costs, and so then that didn't work out well for me or her in the end, because it was all a lot of self-sacrifice, and um, so I was, didn't have boundaries. She learned to she understood very quickly that she was going to be able to uh, always have her way, and it wasn't going to be a balanced relationship whatsoever. And so
It didn't make her happy anyway.
no, and that's what I learned, is that we think, you're gonna make her happy, but in the end, it's not really good for anybody. So we just didn't have, a developed sense of self to know really who we were. So it's like, what happens? The codependency, where everything they feel is leads you and devastating to you, and you just get triggered by everything, and there's just not healthy resolve. And we didn't I'm a communicator, but and love to talk and would want to resolve things, but maybe it was her family's culture, or her upbringing, but zero willingness to talk about anything. So it was we couldn't even confront an issue, and let alone resolve it, because it just had to be ignored and swept under the rug. And
Okay, so let's
yeah.
just move on. So the next question is to tell us how you learned about that she had an affair, and what were your emotions and reactions immediately after finding that out, and then when you encountered your wife's suicide. Just briefly tell that little scenario. First, you heard about the affair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so uh that was the the catalyst for the ultimate collapse of the relationship, and her life was, you know not surprising when you have a relationship that is suffering in a lot of fundamental ways, and there's a lot of disconnection. um she found herself in an affair, and so it went on for a while before I even found out, but it was discovered ultimately, and um really, uh, nothing. I don't think anything quite from up until that moment had impacted me in such a devastating way. And because I think that though our relationship had its issues, our sexual relationship was we were both virgins when we got married, and that space was what I thought was at least like our one sacred, special, beautiful thing that was ours, and kind of like maybe the glue that still held us together through whatever hard times, because that part of the relationship, had a lot of good. So when that just got flipped on its head, and with someone that I knew and actually loved, like a close friend, it definitely was a mind blowing and a mind job. And uh, so so it wasn't something that I was in a emotional maturity place with myself, let alone relationship, to be able to even think like we can work through this. Which now I actually, if I am who I am now, and could magically transport me back to that moment with how I've grown and the wisdom I've gained, I can honestly say I would have a different mindset. I would have tried to work it out still. But at the time, it was just, I had the knee jerk reaction that I think was just deeply, ingrained in probably most of us. It's over. You're gonna divorce now. And so that was my mindset. And she, within a week, um, uh, did kill herself. And um, that in the book, you'll get the bigger story of her suicidality. Of it goes way back to her childhood and a lot early on in our marriage, but it had been very dormant, let's say, since a couple years before the kids were born. And my son and daughter were about 5 and 7 at this time, and so, but when someone has these underlying risk factors associated with suicidality, um, it's typically a life crisis catalyst event that triggers the act. And sure enough, this was a big enough devastating event for her that she really did it. And yeah, I found her in the garage one morning after she dropped the kids off at school, and um, uh, having hung herself, I immediately attempted to save her. That's obviously probably law enforcement training too. I just worked on what I knew how to do in CPR, and so she actually was revived in her heart by the defibrillator when the paramedics came, and so she ultimately passed away, but it was a little more drawn out because she ended up on life support because her heart was restarted, and we thought maybe she'd be okay. So it wasn't just this one off, trauma and grief of she died. It was over a week period of kind of losing her in slow motion, and so it was quite dramatic. And I think how dramatic it all was one of the things that inspired me, I guess you could say, that like, wow, like this would be like an interesting story because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of dramatic scenes of how it all happened, and ultimately letting her go off life support and holding her as she takes her last breaths. And um so
Okay.
yeah, there.
What I like about what you wrote is how personal you were, how vulnerable, and expressing all the emotions that you had, not holding back. I mean, in the book, that you
Mhm.
really shared exactly what you felt. So I know you were completely devastated by this, and you felt so bad for whatever you might have said to her, and then I might have instigated it, or the affair caused it, you didn't know. But there were people and insights, um, and personal practices that eventually helped you. But I know that you had a friend that said something to you right after
At the
that
hospital.
station. What did he say?
So you're probably referring to my friend Kevin, who he
Right.
knew her. He knew her too, and was a friend of the family. And like we had our kids were friends, and so he was devastated too. And he's actually the one too. If you remember the part where I'm on the lawn, losing it once they took over, paramedics took over. Kevin showed up and was there to be there right at that moment, and he just didn't even know what to say except just say that he was there and he was so
But
sorry. And
even just as a friend, just being there, just knowing somebody is helping you witness this and
mhm.
supporting you, that's amazing.
So he had a real special, close role, I guess you could say, in the events. And so then at the hospital, uh, later that same day, when she was stabilized and on life support, and we were in the short day window of thinking maybe she'll be totally okay, but obviously maybe she's not. So in the hallway, he was very, let's say, loving and hopeful, just for me and the kids, that no matter what, things were going to be okay. And he said, and the way he expressed that was, he says, I know that things look, you know, so bad right now, and but I just see rainbows in the future for you and the kids. And that really stuck. And I think visually, just the beauty of that vision is like in such a dark moment. So it's like he shot a rainbow across a pitch black room, and gave me this vision, and speaking that truth into the darkness and into the lies that could start setting in of despair. It was a beautiful thing to say, and it was a true thing to say. And then, but then it was up to me and the kids to live that out and to persevere through it and to
That,
heal. Mm-hmm.
that's a reminder to all of us how to speak to someone that's going through some kind of trauma. When you just say, oh, you poor thing, and you just reinforce the suffering, or
Mm-hmm.
you say something to show, I really feel what you're feeling, but this is possible. You don't
Mm-hmm.
see it yet. That was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. It's hard to, that's, I think, one of the most difficult places to be there in relationship with someone else that you deeply care about, what to say in moments that are the darkest. And you can say the wrong things by being, you can be too positive and say, oh, you're going to be just fine, this is
I know
no
you don't
problem.
want that either. You want
Yeah.
compassion without
Yeah.
dwelling in the suffering and giving a little hint
Yeah.
of something better.
He
That was
basically, he did it perfectly by acknowledging the suffering and the seriousness, right? And then, but then speaking hope and belief in me and the kids, because he that's what it looked like it was going to be, and so yeah, he did a great job. I'm very thankful for his heart. He has a big heart, and we still keep in contact to this day. And
beautiful.
I moved away across the country, but we're still close. Yeah, we're bonded by that experience.
Yeah, that was special. Uh, all right. So 10 months after your wife's suicide, you found a new love, got married, and created a blended family. So describe the experience, the shattered dreams that happened of a life together, and how you managed to forgive and focus on love.
Yeah, so that I think what that taught me is sometimes we want to believe, and we should believe, after a real painful experience, when we're coming out of it, it's a fresh start. Let's be positive. Let's have a beautiful life. Let's go. And so it all seemed like that when I found this new love, and we really thought things were going to be great, and we got married, and she had 4 kids and I had my 2, so now we're blending a family of 6 kids. And but we were all in. It felt like we made it, and both out of both of our real dark times, and found someone that we would really be happy with, and would work out. And uh, that would be a long story of how that relationship, ultimately wasn't compatible. Um, but the lesson is how, you may have not, the hard times may not be over. I thought maybe Cindy's death would have been the peak of the, or let's say the deepest part of the valley, but I was going up, and then this divorce just devastated me. And the way I understood it, with how painful it was that I think it was the time when enough had happened, enough painful experiences piled up with Cindy's suicide and now this divorce, and at the same time I lost my wealth in investments, which, as a man and a provider, was a devastating factor too. Very small compared to the relationship loss, but still, just I mention it because it kind of piled on. It was just like experiencing the loss, just devastating losses this period of time. Um, and so I think what it did was made me, it kind of brought up everything. It was like, it put me into such a dark place that it wasn't just now about looking at, getting over the trauma of Cindy's suicide, or now this pain of a relationship breakup, loss, divorce. But it was like, I started to see these deep traumas and pains that had been with me since childhood, and this the self beyond these experiences that needed to heal, right? Like before, it was always just, okay, I need to learn about suicide, understand it, do these things to heal, and but it was like it was this outside impact I was healing. Well, there was something about that divorce that hurt me, that triggered something deep inside, like where I felt a loss of self that I'd never felt before, where where my sense of self-worth and love was really in jeopardy. And so uh, that's when I had to go on that journey now of real deep internal self-discovery and self-love and compassion, because finding enough had me starting to believe that maybe the like darkness and suffering was my life. And because it was so prolonged and so profound and enduring. So I I had been practicing things of well-being for a long time, but that's when uh, the the only answer I could see was to just double down on filling up my cup with positivity and doing the thing, continue to do the things that, give me well-being, but continue to search for new sources of wisdom and tools and practices. So, I added, like we talked about, is doing ice baths. And I had been into meditation, but I'd never actually done the practice of yoga. And so I started doing that, and started doing positive affirmations and guided meditations. And um, it all, I think it all definitely mattered. It's like there's going to be this impact of darkness and light hitting us in life from outside and inside. And if we're going to live, if we're going to thrive, then the light has to overpower the dark. There's got to be more light than dark. You have to feel more peace than suffering. And so what is it that gives me that light and peace and happiness? And do those things and do them every day and keep going and move away from the darkness. And so
And surround yourself with people that support you, and stay away from the people that bring you back to some other negative
yeah.
thing if you can. That make people can be like your friend, just to say that good thing at the
Mm-hmm.
right time. And
Yeah.
so there's another piece here. Your children lost their biological mother, and then they had a stepmom. I don't know how happy they were or not, but how have you helped them to heal through love from the beginning of the trauma, all of it?
Yeah. So uh Zuko and Brisa, I will always say, I'm sure of it, that of all the things that have gone wrong in life, right, the painful and the dark, they've been just this enduring sense of light and a gifting of love and happiness in my life. So I know I've loved them deeply and been there for them, but they must have brought something, innately, because it couldn't just be the nurture, nature nurture that I've given them, but they're so I start with that to basically say that with them it's almost been easy, like, if that makes sense. They have this ability with at least with the environment that they've had. They had a great start with Cindy. Cindy was with them for through those tender years of the first five, right? And she was a perfect mother. She was there 24/7. She loved, talked to them, did everything right. And so they had that. So I'll always be so thankful for Cindy for how the time that she did have with them, she did right by them, and she didn't want to leave them. And they know that to this day. She lost herself, but she I think that I'm a believer in the psychology that talks about how those first years really set the stage for how they're going to deal with whatever life is going to throw at them from thereafter. So they had a solid foundation. So but beyond that, um they when when it happened at their because of their young age, I decided, because the advice was kind of split among the professionals of talking to kids or not about the parent suicide, about the the truth of the how they died, this being a suicide. My heart and I knowing them, I decided to not tell them that she had killed herself, that it was a heart attack, and so that at least their grieving at that young age was not complicated by the suicide. Because as anyone that's familiar with suicide knows, they call that complicated grief. It's horrible. It's every negative feeling you could possibly feel uh, just assails you. And so I wanted them to just be able to more simply grieve that their mom was gone, and not worry about that strangeness of in their little mind of like, she did it to herself, and they say how kids internalize everything. They're like narcissistic by nature. It would have been because they did something wrong. What did they do wrong that made that happen? So I wanted them to be free of that. So they didn't know the truth. We were successful in keeping that private until actually just several months ago, before the book came out. And so during these years, we had a lot of family support. When Cindy died, we moved in with family for a good number of months, and then stayed close by. So they had that extended family, and so I'm very thankful for that, because I know that might not be available for everybody, but they did have close aunts and uncles who they were already close with, so that could kind of fill in that mother role. Some aunts, and then they had their cousins, and so their life stayed very full and busy. And like, kids are humans are resilient, and kids are definitely resilient, and they're more able to live in the moment than we are as adults, with our minds that keep wanting to go deep past and far future.
Right, but especially when they do have loving support around them.
Mm-hmm. So they really had a lot of love. And uh then in the remarriage, they the stepmom, she was really great with them, really great. And that, in that aspect of being so compassionate and supportive about the loss of Cindy and the grieving that we were still going through, because when we got married, it had only been a year and a half. And may sound like a lot to some people, but that type of grief and trauma, it's not. So she and she was a great communicator. So she had, even though the kids didn't know that it was suicide, she she had a lot of knowledge and wisdom about how to um you know talk about hard feelings, and recognizing your feelings and listening. So they had, it was a blessing, that in a lot of ways at that time, um that it was a good relationship, and they accepted and embraced her, as mom. I think that's one of the reasons why it hurt really bad when it didn't work out, because as a father, it feels like it's my responsibility, and now they're losing another mom, and it's like, that's the last thing you want for these kids again. But and unfortunately, it ended up being a situation where it was so negative in the end that we had to just break total contact and ties. So um, double-edged sword, I guess. I think that there was for sure some sting for that for me, and I'm sure for the kids, they seemed to handle it really well. But then to move on, it was probably for the best, and to keep moving forward with life, because that wasn't going to be our life anymore. So, but yeah, endlessly surprising twists and turns of life, and we've settled in to a long-term relationship with my current partner, and she doesn't have any kids, so that is kind of beneficial, I guess, in the sense that there's not the complications of blending, kids as well, or exes. It's just like we're a very unified family, like we don't have outside forces kind of pulling at us. And so they've you think maybe they'd be jaded by now and not trust a new mom.
But
uh,
they could.
but they love her and she loves them, and so
Well, they
I'm
must
believing.
be craving a mom. That's interesting. And
Yeah, they're just they I think they have huge hearts, and they're the way that they've been able to move through change and difficult times. uh I could honestly say is inspirational and encouraging to me. If if they can do it, as these little kids, then I better be able to, keep hanging in there and moving forward and not giving
that's,
up.
but they've known that you've been there. You're the one figure that's always been there.
Yeah, which I now like talk about attachment wounds. I don't think I ever want them to grow up and leave the house because
Well,
we are like
how old are they now?
uh well, they're getting close to birthdays, but 12 and 14. So it's been some time. Yeah. It's I think it's 7 years since her death in February. So
And puberty is a changing time, so things are going to
yeah.
change.
Yeah, no, that's already been happening for sure. They're in it, and they're still doing great. So I'm
Happy.
endlessly.
Well, it's all so then the last question or thing I want to ask you about is on your book cover, you describe yourself as one who embraces life's beauty alongside its inherent suffering. So, what suggestions and advice and ideas about life can you offer our listeners about how to think, how to feel, and how you can heal from whatever negative things are happening through love?
Yeah. So through the journey that I've been on to have to heal, facing real deep darkness, there's been a lot of things that have been helpful. I think there's a lot out there. That's why it's very worthwhile to be a seeker and to keep learning and exposing yourself to things, because you just don't know what else might really help you. And so I'm thankful that you know for all that is out there, and that had a mindset to search and be open. So there's a lot, but I would say I think the things that impacted me the most is is relates to like the nature of existence. um because and in relation to people who lose themselves completely to suicide. Suicide is the complete loss of self. It's your own self came second to the things that happened to you, the 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 disappointments, the negative. It came to define them instead of what was beautiful about them, which was infinite and immense, right? So um they the life is positive and negative. There's going to be beauty and horror. And in the book, I like to refer to the wisdom that refers to it as chaos and order, creation, destruction, and light and dark. It kind of encompasses that life is going to have everything. And I think that people who lose themselves to such a degree that they take their own lives, at some point they didn't come to accept and definitely not embrace this reality that it was going to be hard too. And not only hard, but it was going to be brutal, and you were going to hit times that were horrific. And they decided, for many reasons, and every suicide is complex, um, and it's not to judge them harshly, but but the evidence that they took their own lives is basically there can't be any clearer evidence that they rejected life, what life is, because they didn't do it because life was pleasant and happy and going the ways they wanted. They did it because of the hard. And so I felt too, once I hit so much hard and dark, I was able to empathize that, like, wow, yeah, this is, I could empathize that mindset of maybe it's so dark that it's not worth it. And um but when you if you make it through those hardest times, and this is comes to the mindset um that I think is so powerful and helpful and empowering to the self, is how uh to embrace life as it is, that it is going to be hard, it is going to be wonderful, and to not only uh, accept that, but to realize that you even needed that we couldn't have appreciated the good without the bad, or it, like any good feeling, you needed its contrast. If you never knew what it was like to be lonely, then how could you appreciate being with the people you love, right? They were just always there. It wouldn't, you just wouldn't even know. And that's just one example. It literally is everything. You need the contrast. So it's okay to experience sadness. And it's okay to feel bad about yourself and about life, but be careful to not get lost in it. Don't get the black and white thinking that that's now your life, because it isn't. It's an aspect of it. It's a period of time, and you can bring yourself more light. It really can be our decision. We're always going to be impacted, but there is so much power within us to choose how we're going to think, how we're going to feel. And so yeah, just embracing that life is chaos and order, and light and dark, and that's okay. And then uh the the sub to that, underneath it, I would say embracing that reality of existence, um really really exploring self-love. And because if we love ourselves, and if you don't know what that means, it's probably because you've never felt so dark, and maybe even hating yourself. uh it's in those dark moments that you realize what self-love is, if you can come out of it. And um so going on that journey of finding self, finding your own meaning of just you apart from everything that is not you. That it's not what you look like, it's not who you're with, it's not what anyone thinks about you, it's not what you achieve, that there's this self that is beautiful and worthy and deserves life and peace beyond all of that. To
We're
find to
just so good at judging ourselves for all those kind of things that you just mentioned. Not
Yeah.
good enough. I know, like in tennis, people criticize themselves all the time. You're so stupid, you miss that. You miss things. It's part of the game, and it's part of the game of life.
So to change, so I felt it tangibly, by uh, when I really started practicing self-love intentionally. And part of it was looking at myself in hard times as I would my inner child, like picturing my 3-year-old self. You know, what would I do with him? How would I support and love him in this moment? And and obviously, I mean, it came natural to be like, oh, that little guy deserves to be loved, deserves to be forgiven, deserves to be supported. And so I really did start catching myself in times when something would go wrong, and you'd be like, have a negative self-talk about, like, I suck, or like, instead of talking to myself like that, doing the opposite, which is to tell myself, like, it's okay, like, this was a hard one, you can do better next time. So you can really put it in practice, self-love. And there was times when I gave myself a hug in the morning getting out of bed. Now I can get it. If you're in a relationship, you can get a little extra support in that. But when I was by myself, I would give myself a hug. And it sounds weird, and I would still think it was weird, I'm sure, if I never had to live it out. But to manifest that to your own self physically, it's a powerful thing. Like, I love you, I accept you, like, that, if you've really like suffered deeply and almost lost yourself, to do that to yourself and do it sincerely is unbelievably powerful, because that's our higher self, our really showing up when it's needed. And like, it's not self-absorption, it's not narcissism, it's like, no, like, who deserves love more and compassion than our own self? So if we're going to give it to other people, give it to yourself, and you'll naturally give it to everybody else.
And
So
then you'll also recognize when someone is withholding it from you or speaking in a negative way. You can know, no, that's not who I am. No,
mhm.
that's not for you. You can protect yourself too.
Yeah,
Honor
yeah,
yourself.
yeah, you learn to start doing a lot, like having boundaries, and you're realizing your needs matter, and things that we take for granted, and don't know how to do a lot of times with how we're raised and with society. Um but you got to seek. You don't know what you don't know. And so that's why it's a very short chapter in the book, but in it's not even like a specific principle that's like really profoundly beautiful to inspire, but it's the continual learning and growth. And it's just to make a point that there's being proactive in our own growth, embracing who we are right now, but still remembering that if you're not growing, you might not just be staying the same. We're creatures of growth and movement. You could be, you might be going the other direction. So stay proactive in taking care of ourselves. Stay proactive in learning new things, trying new things. Life is I think most enjoyed and vibrant when we're exploring, pushing our own boundaries in healthy ways. And
Life is seeking growth and seeking light.
mhm. Yeah, we start out with nothing,
Picturing a
right?
tree at the moment, that how it keeps on growing.
We don't think of like the progression of a human life when you're a baby to now, how it all played into who you are now, right? Every single impression that you've experienced and the things that you've felt, and it could have been so many different things. And I'm sure you're so thankful for all the ways that have uh, lifted you and given you the wisdom that you have. So could it have been more? Probably, right? Could it have been less? Yeah. So it's like, don't let life just happen to you. Be proactive in seeking your own growth and healing, and it'll be that much better.
So let's end with the title of your book.
Life and Death by Intention. And I hope that people see it in only they don't see it in a negative way, because I thought, like, oh, what if someone thinks like this is a book about like, here's how you live, and then also here's how you can intentionally die. And it's not like that whatsoever. It is all about life and love and light. But the story that really creates that contrast, and that the most stark of human stories, which is either a life lost to the darkness or a life lived in the light. So a life by intention is the beautiful life, is the loving yourself, is overcoming the challenges and growing. And life, death by intention is the loss of self, is losing yourself to the darkness and to the lies that you could come to believe about yourself. So that's the meaning behind the title. Is there's those are the two ends of the spectrum. And I want life by intention to be all of our story. And the best way to do that is the subtitle, which is when darkness comes, you are the light. And because love is great from around us, and there is so much around us if we choose to see it and nurture it. But ultimately, we do need to save and love ourselves. And so we are the ultimate light for ourselves, and that's something that we need to realize and to take with us and remember, especially when it's the hardest.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Christopher Brodie, for your life's work as a law enforcement officer, keeping us safe, and your mission to help share your experience and help men especially, but women too, to become more vulnerable, really be willing to look into themselves and do that work and face your deepest fears and deepest fearful memories that are stored inside, and coming into a state of acceptance and gratitude and living life by intention and with love, because love is the ultimate. When we can just love and feel love for being alive, it's so special to be alive.
It is, and love makes it, all that much more beautiful. It's like, why not?
Why not just feel it while we're here?
We
Thank
can choose that.
you for this wonderful talk today.
All right, thank you, Erica. We'll see you next time.
Yes, and to those of you listening, please check out my website, relationshiphealingtoolbox.com, and click the link to the Healing Through Love series to watch a replay of this interview, other powerful guests, and to get your free gift. Also visit my main website, drericagoodstone.com. Feel free to send me a message or to find out how I might be able to help you to heal through love. And remember to love and cherish the most important person in your life, you. Only then can you truly love anyone else. So bye for now.
Bye.